Monday morning. Abdullah is Abdullah Mohammed Abdullah, murdered in Ottawa Friday night. Abdullah Quer Yosef, murdered Wednesday night. An as yet unidentified man shot Sunday night. We don't know his condition. A third Abdullah brother shot, wounded Friday night. We don't know how seriously. Being sought on countrywide warrants. Ahmed Sayed, Mohammed Sheer, Abdullah Osman. Just 1 week's toll on the streets of Ottawa. Ottawa, capital of Canada. And on and on and on we go. Folks, it is time to call a spade a spade. It is time to buck up our courage and publicly admit what we all know in our heart of hearts. We all know this. And that is that we have a very serious ethnic gang problem in our city. Now, I know, as I said, that that statement is going to offend some of you, and I think that's one of the problems. But it's time that we stop pretending that some cultures are integrating into civil society, the Canadian society, as well as other cultures. It is simply not true. That is not to say that a few Jones and Smith names don't crop up on the crime logs of our police departments, because very clearly they do. But by now, we've got to finally admit that the kind of names that I mentioned at the top of the show are involved, yes, in a disproportionate number of crimes, not just in our city. To put it bluntly, there are far more Mohammeds and Abdullahs and Ahmeds involved in serious crimes than their mere numbers would warrant. There, I've said it. Sue me. And to be clear, this is occurring not just this past week. Here's the headlines. I don't know if you can see this or not. In today's Ottawa Sun, Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday. Well, unfortunately, we've got Bloody Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays as well. Pussyfooting around this issue is not working. I mean, we've been pussyfooting, pretending this is not happening for years. It's not working. We've got to address the problem. Pretending that all cultures adapt to Canadian society, to the Canadian culture, readily and easily is simply not true. It's not. And the evidence is everywhere, including on the front page of today's Ottawa Sun. Just go through the names. You know, many cultures, most cultures, they come to Canada and they integrate extremely well, thank God. With rare exceptions, for example, Asians come to Canada. They work their tails off, obey the law, and before you know it, they're moving into new homes, contributing to our country. Ditto those from places like Lebanon, Indonesia, India, Western Europe, and I could mention others. It is also true that some of those who come here from the Middle East and Africa quickly do integrate and become contributing, law-abiding members of our society. But sadly, the evidence is everywhere. It stares us in the face. Cultural differences rampant in some Middle Eastern and African nations present hurdles that very clearly far too many people cannot overcome. And I refer here to, and once again, I know some of you are going to be offended by this, but it's true. It's true what I am saying, folks. I'd love, if some of you disagree, I would love to hear from you. On what basis do you disagree? When I talk about the different kinds of cultures, I am talking about in many countries, and not all, we're talking a minority here, but by and large, there is a culture in some of these countries where there is a total lack of respect for human life. Beheadings, floggings, stoning to deaths, honor killings, quite common. I refer as well to the terrible treatment of women, and you can try excuse it all you want. In many cases, including some of the supposedly some of the most civilized countries, Saudi Arabia, for example, the treatment of women is terrible, inhumane. We should not ever put up with that kind of treatment of women or anybody in our culture, but it is accepted, and in fact, in some cases, it is state sponsored in some of those countries. There is also in some of those countries a total disregard for the rule of law. You see some of these countries where, I mean, as simple as like nobody obeys traffic signs, for example. It's just chaos. There is total disrespect, fear, and perhaps rightly so, of the police in some of those countries. That is the kind of disrespect and lack of fear that carries over into this country. The lack of respect for human life, terrible treatment of women, total disregard for the rule of law that we see in far too many Middle Eastern and some African countries, not them all, but some, is now sadly spilling over into murderous gunfire on our streets. Am I not correct here? I believe that one of the problems that we've got is our unwillingness in this country to admit to the obvious. And so we pretend that what is happening is not really happening, and we try to ignore it, and we're doing so at great peril. It's unfortunate, but it's true. You can't fix a problem until you admit there is a problem and identify the problem. You got to admit that there is a problem before you can deal with it. Thus it is that any attempt, or most attempt, to address the cultural issues in this country are met with cries of racism. You've heard them. If more police are sent, for example, to high crime areas, and it just so happens that those high crime areas are populated primarily by minorities, the cries of racism are long and loud and protracted. And it's not just happening in Ottawa. Toronto has long had a very, very serious problem, crime problem, with some segments of the Jamaican community. But efforts there to increase police presence in those high crime areas has been met with stiff resistance from many members of City Hall, and in many cases, including here in Ottawa, police ability to deal with these ethnic problems has been lessened. They can't do it anymore. You know, here in Ottawa, one of the areas, but not the only one of the areas that we have a serious problem, and nobody seems to want to admit it, is within the Somali community. And I'm not alone. Many people in the Somali community, the leaders, will admit it themselves. There is a problem within the Somali community in our city. One of the reasons is that there are far too many fathers not present, and in some cases leaving mothers to raise boys who have no respect whatsoever for women, including no respect for their mothers. I have talked with more than one female teacher who tell me horror stories of trying to deal with some of these boys who absolutely have no respect for them. Because can you blame them? I mean, they have been taught that women should not be afforded any respect, including their own mothers. Unfortunately, and I had a good deal of experience with this when I founded Big Brothers in Ottawa, co-founded Big Brothers, became its first president. I had quite a few dealings with this very problem, lack of fathers, particularly in ethnic communities. Not exclusively, of course. And not only that, but many members of the Somali community will admit that while other people who come to Canada immigrate from other countries, some of which I have mentioned, integrate very well, they'll get jobs, they'll work hard, make whatever sacrifices are required, etc., etc. But in some segments of the Somali community, welfare has been a family tradition for generations. They just, in some cases, seem unable to get out of it. They're not the only ones. I mean, we have lots of Smiths and Jones on welfare as well. But there is a special problem. Excuse me. And it's time that we admitted it so that we can deal with it, okay? I'm not sure if all of the responsibility lies with people who come here from. It could very well be that because we try to ignore the problem, we're not dealing with it. If there are cultural problems, and very clearly there are, then we should do everything we can to overcome that. People who come here should be told, for example, that you cannot discriminate against women in this fashion, et cetera, et cetera. There are many other cultural aspects of Canada that I don't think some of these people who come here are even aware of. In some cases, people, and it's not just in Ottawa. I mean, I've seen this in Vancouver as well. People will come here, they'll move into a community, and never once, perhaps in their whole lives, do they even have to speak English or French, and nor do they have to really pay any attention to the so-called Canadian culture. These are growing problems that we've got to deal with, folks. Until we finally admit that we have a cultural problem with some immigrant communities, we're going to continue to have the kind of bloody Sundays that the Sun talks about today, not just on Sundays, but the rest of the week as well. You know, one of the things that I'm not sure some people are aware of is that the Canadian culture, and yes, we do have a Canadian culture, a very distinct Canadian culture, even distinct from the American culture, is a distinct Canadian culture here. We are a different kind of people in many ways than they are in any other nation. Thank God. It's taken us a long time to create this culture, but our culture continues to evolve. We have in many aspects a different culture today than we had, let's say, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think the discovery of 215 tragic bodies near Kamloops from a residential school is ample evidence of that. Today, we are horrified that some of our ancestors did this. We cannot imagine that kind of thing happening today because we have evolved. Our culture has evolved and thank God continues to evolve. We are changing here. Some say for the better, others say not. But very clearly, our culture is changing. The reason I talk about this is that I fear that some of the cultures, particularly Middle Eastern cultures, not them all, they are not evolving. Some of these cultures, it seems to me, or some aspects of it, you might find in North America in the 18th century. I'm not sure that some of these cultures that are coming here have evolved. And I think when they come here, and they have great difficulty at this, particularly if there's no father in the home, there's no sense of authority. I would appreciate any calls from you, any comments from you on this. Am I on the right track here? Do you disagree? Do you agree? What do you see here? And what do you see as a solution? Very clearly, we got to deal with this. Far too many Ahmeds and Mohammeds, not exclusively, but far more than their numbers warrant. What should we do about it, folks? John, any response at all here?
Lots of response, Lowell. I'll give the phone number up. People can call in, and they can text you as well at 613-413-2217. If I see your comment on Facebook, I give it a like. That lets you know that I have seen it and that it's on my list to get to Lowell. We've also got an email address for you, lowell@blasttheradio.com. We'll begin with an email from Lisa. Lowell, what we need is a minimum sentencing in this country for a start. We also need to get rid of the immigrant minister who is clearly responsible for vetting people coming into this country and deporting them as well. I live near Alta Vista. I heard the shots Friday. There must have been at least 15 rounds going off. Sounded like a Wild West show. If I hadn't heard it for myself, I wouldn't have believed it. That's Lisa's comment. On Facebook, we have Tim saying, thank you for stating these facts. This will bother the woke progressive mob, but too bad. It's about time we address the ethnic elephant in the room. As Chrétien once said, the proof is the proof is the proof. Sabrina says, thank God for your honesty, your courage, and your voice. Thank you, Lowell Green. Peter says, people like Bill Blair would sooner lock up Canadians protesting different issues than the murdering thugs in cities like Ottawa and Toronto. They need to unleash the cops and let them kick some damn ass. Darlene says those two shot dead was during the day at a Tim Hortons drive-through. Something must change before an innocent bystander becomes a victim, including kids. Cheryl says, what about the 250?
Let me just stop there right there.
Yep.
Yeah, what should change? I'd like some people to address this. What do you think? Because I think that we in this country, in this city, we have some responsibility here as well. I'm not saying that those people committing the crime that they don't have to accept responsibility, but I think that there is something that we aren't doing here. Not just the application of the law, but are we, for example, crowding too many of the people of the same culture into a small area? Are we not providing the proper guidance? Are we not providing the proper policing? Let's deal with the problem here, and let's deal with your idea of what a solution might be. You can't throw all of these people in jail. And by the way, by the time you throw them in jail, the crime has already been committed. There is already blood on the streets. What can we do to stop the blood on the streets? Jace is on the line. Yes, Jace, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Lowell.
Yes, sir.
I think, first of all, we need to deal with immigration. We need to have people understand what kind of country this is. If they were required to have some more knowledge about what Canada is about, or to learn more of the language, I think Justin Trudeau is just looking for free votes, and the easiest way is to throw open the doors and bring people in, whether they're refugees or not. But obviously we have a problem, as you said. So I think immigration is first. Second, there is a cultural difference, but I don't know how we fix that.
Well, can I just jump in here, Jace? I use as one example of how we seem to almost welcome this cultural difference. For example, I'm not sure how prevalent it is in Ottawa, but it is well publicized in Toronto that there are a number of families there where the husband has 3 or possibly 4 wives. Each one of the wives, of course, and all having different children and collecting huge sums of welfare. We know that polygamy exists. We also know that it is illegal, and yet, because of the cultural difference, because of the fear of being called racist, we refuse, and that's just one example, to apply the law. Now, just think of the consequences. You've got 4 different wives and 1 husband. How well supervised do you think those children are when there is very clearly an absent father? That's a major problem, not just within the ethnic minority communities. The lack of fathers is a major cause of crime, particularly among young men. But there's an example of where we know there's a problem. We know that this man should not have 4 different wives. Forget the welfare aspect of it. What is it doing to the children? What sorts of problems do you think there will be when these kids have got 4 different mothers and 1 father?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jason. Yeah.
But we also have to address the judicial system, because it's allowing this type of thing to go on. I mean, there's still FLDS polygamous families in BC. It's ongoing. So we need the federal government to stand up and take charge and stop spending money on ridiculous things, and to literally get back to some common sense. Where the hell did that go?
In my book. Thank you, Jace. Good to hear from you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have to get a word in here for some good friends up at Shields. We were up in Pakenham. I just had to get out. So I went to Pakenham, the 5-span feed store there. I love it there, to get some new pigeon feed, et cetera, et cetera. And I drove by Shields, and I see a great big sign there, delivery drivers needed. And very clearly, they're doing very, very well. They need more delivery drivers. And by the way, and I see along the Carp Road all kinds of signs, help wanted. I don't understand how we can have an unemployment problem in this country when everywhere I go, I see signs, drivers needed, workers needed, et cetera, including at Shields. But here's just one more example, folks, of When you do it right, you do well, particularly in the Ottawa Valley. Shields, big sale underway right now with Frigidaire. Go to their website. It's a beautiful website. You'll see everything that you need to see there. You'll see the prices. And on the Frigidaire special, depending on what you buy, you can save up to $1,200. So there is Shields, a good local company, family owned, all the product that you would possibly want, delivery within 2 or 3 days. They can find another driver, and you can save a lot of money. Shields.ca. Julie is on the line. Yes, Julie.
Hi, Lowell. I'm going
Yes.
to maybe disagree with you at this
Sure.
point.
Sure.
Okay, and I'll tell you why. When I was a kid, I grew up in a rough neighborhood in Ottawa. You would say the projects. Went to a really rough school, went to a really rough high school, mainly all white Canadians. And even in my schools, my junior high and my high school, um, people had three ways to go, and that was jail. They're either deceased or they made it out. And there's not a whole lot of us that made it out. And I saw some pretty horrific things growing up, and not anyone of an ethnic race. And then my parents live in the Heron community, Heron Road community, and the amount of people that they have met from different cultures and amazing people that have helped them out over the years.
Julie, before you go further, how long ago was this?
What that I've lived in a rough neighborhood, I would say
Yeah.
80s and 90s, and I lived without a dad too, so
No, but the point I'm trying to make is it's a vastly different situation today than it was in the 80s or even the 90s. Vastly different. Most immigration, even as recently as the 80s and 90s, was Western European. There was not nearly the same cultural difference that we are confronted with today. The situation has changed. I mean, there's no question that, and I already mentioned this, most people who come here, I mentioned Asians, Lebanese, etc., they integrate very well and have contributed. Look at what the Italians have done in this country. But it's different today. It's changed, believe me, Julie.
yeah. Well, I
Have a
just
look at the names. Have you seen, sorry, have you seen the front page? Have you seen the Ottawa Sun today?
I have, but I also know that there's a lot of great people in that community, and they work really hard, and they've only treated my parents with the utmost respect
Oh,
and us with
absolutely.
the utmost
Absolutely.
respect.
And I've
So
said that.
it's not,
But the fact is
yeah.
that, Julie, the fact is that there is a disproportionate amount of crime in some of these ethnic communities. Disproportionate. Yep. Most people are
Yeah.
good, but sadly,
Yeah.
there are some communities that are having trouble. They're not integrating as well.
Yeah, and we will agree to disagree.
Okay. You don't think there's an ethnic problem?
No, I think there might be just a violence problem in our city, a gun problem in our city. Let's look at you know, how they're getting the guns. They're getting them illegally, so they're on the black market. So why don't we crack that down and stop the gun violence before our innocent bystander does get hit?
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you, Thank you, Julie. Thank you for your
You're
call.
welcome.
I appreciate including disagree with me. That's great. That's what a debate is all about. Thank you very much. Yes, John, we've got some more emails coming in.
Yes, we do. More comments from Facebook. Hazel says, not offended. Thank God someone finally speaks up. Remember when Alta Vista was prime place to live? Now looks like a ghetto. Nina says, increase in unscreened immigrants equals increase in gang and turf wars. Innocent lives, including children, will be lost. It's a way of life in many other countries and soon will be a way of life in Canada if border security is not improved. Tina says, in the 80s they blamed Middle Eastern and Asians. 90s they blamed Somalians. There is always passing blame on cultures. I grew up in the projects and I've seen it all my life. There are and always will be an equal amount of blame against all cultures. She adds, my father was murdered by a Latino, my uncle by a white Canadian. Darlene says, Ottawa now has advocates as city councillors that protect the minorities, Mr. King for one. Joshua says, we are no longer a building nation. Immigration is a strength, but we should choose wisely. If you come here, have a plan. If you don't meet your goals, send them back, commit a crime, and send them back. Darlene says, no, father has nothing to do with this. The mother is still used to her homeland mentality.
No, I have to disagree. In fact, if you believe in science, for example, there are any number of statistics which show that those children, particularly males, raised in a fatherless home, I mean, most of them grow up fine, but the chances are greater. I kid you not. I swear to God. And you can find these figures. The chances are greater of trouble in the home if there is no father. The absence of father is a major factor in crime among young men. Go ahead, please, John.
Actually, we've got Joanne on the line right now, Lowell.
Joanne, please, go ahead.
Hi, Lowell. Thanks for doing what you do and keep doing what you're doing. I think you're great.
Thank you.
Just to let you know, I live in the Alta Vista area, but you don't have to look very far. I mean, just go to the schools. It's going on in the schools. My son went to St. Pat's a number of years ago. These fights and these wars are happening in the schools.
I know.
So, just go as far as the schools. And if there's no school, well, then it's gonna like stream out onto the streets.
I know. I have grandchildren in schools. They tell me. I know.
Yeah, it's horrific.
But we've got to we have to admit that there is a problem, and
Absolutely.
and that we have to deal with the problem. You cannot deal with the problem. You can't fix a problem if you do not identify the problem. And I think I think that the news in the Sun today very clearly identifies a serious problem. Not the only problem. I've said repeatedly, that's not to say that there's not lots of Jones and Smiths that are involved in crime as well. But very clearly, there is a disproportionate amount of crime in some ethnic communities, just some.
Agreed.
Thank you for the call. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Perfect.
I have to raise one other issue. I want to thank you very much for your comments on this. Debbie and I had a lot of fun this morning. As you're probably aware, we have been told that everyone over the age of 80 could apply this morning at 8 o'clock and get your second dose moved up. My second dose is scheduled for July 14. I'd like to have it sooner than that for a number of reasons. So very early this morning, Debbie was on the phone. I was on the phone. Debbie was on the computer, et cetera, et cetera. We're trying to rebook my second shot. Well, this is what I love. John, don't you just love it? When you phone someone, and it's not just about vaccines, but you phone someone and you get the voice on the very friendly voice said, your call is very important to us. And then ding, on comes the music.
I'm often that voice that people hear when they call, but yes, I know what you mean.
And I must tell you that the music this morning, when you phone to try to get a vaccine appointment, it is terrible. It is progressive jazz. And it's the same sort of like the same sax hitting the same notes. And so she sat on the phone for about 20 minutes. I was another 25 minutes. Nothing. All we got was once in a while, your call is very important to us. And I'm shouting at the phone saying, yeah, it's so important. You're keeping me waiting for 45 minutes. We never did get through. Oh. So we'll give it another try tomorrow morning. Your call is very important to us, but please hang on for the next hour. Okay, well, we ignore you. I'll tell you one thing. They're not going to ignore you at Centennial Glass. Once again, just as in Shears, these are great people, local business. This is not a big box store. The employee, if someone from Centennial comes to your house or your business and does some glass work or whatever, fixes screens, fixes windows, installs new windows or doors, these are Centennial employees. They don't farm out. They don't contract out. Because they want to make sure that the work is done properly every time. They take great pride in it. Whether it's glass furniture, custom furniture, beautiful job in custom furniture, windows, doors, patios, the mirrors, wonderful frame mirrors, beautiful. Centennial Glass, folks. They're on Industrial Avenue, not far from the train yards on Industrial Avenue, and they're up in Renfrew. Emergency service, yes, absolutely. They come to my rescue a couple of times. Centennial Glass. John, want to thank you. I understand that we had 2 or 3 people were a little concerned about where I was last week. Just take. I realized. Well, you told me that we'd done 150 programs, and I hadn't taken any holidays, so I just needed a little bit of a break, rethink some of the things, and we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you very much, folks. And you know what? Keep the phone call. We had 3 phone calls today. That's wonderful. Keep the faxes coming, the emails. We need to hear from you. Not only do I need to hear from you, but the listeners need to hear from you, okay? Thank you all. We will be back.
Show number 157 today, Lowell. It's great to have you back.
Lowell Green, live on blasttheradio.com. Show info and links at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Subscribe to the Lowell Green podcast. Available on Apple, Google,